To frame our discussion and our ideation today, I'd like to just give you a basic view of what we see as connectivity. Connectivity can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Let's, for our purposes, say that connectivity are those services and technologies that can be deployed to improve the daily lives of the citizens, as well as improve productivity, growth, and job development. I'll start with the discussion of broadband as one of those key services, and then move into container costs, export, import, trade issues. Broadband is booming. Everyone's jumped on the bandwagon. We've been evangelizing what broadband can do for countries, and everyone's getting it. It's a matter of implementing it now. Thank you. Next. Data is exploding. We're expecting that within the next 5 years, there will be approximately 9 billion inhabitants on the Earth and approximately 50 billion devices speaking to each other. How are networks today going to deal with this data explosion? And how can this data be put to effective and productive uses? That's the challenge we have. Next. Why are so many administrations, governments, seeking out broadband and basically embracing the impact that broadband can have? Is because the evidence is very clear. Broadband can affect us in two significant ways. One, directly as residential consumers, and the way we operate our businesses, make them more productive, and also in the direct investment requirement to actually dig and install fiber optic networks, wireless networks, and the like. Next. The World Bank went out very early in 2008 to try to prove what broadband can do for both development and job growth, GDP growth. And we were very early out with our studies that showed that a 10% increase in penetration, broadband penetration, can result anywhere from 1.3 to 1.5% GDP growth. Now, we were criticized early on about some of our methodologies and some of the data used, but the point is, it was not perfect data, but we wanted to get the story out. And soon after that, several renowned research and analytical houses basically supported the same evidence, and that is broadband can have a significant impact in GDP growth and employment growth. Thank you. Next. Now here's the challenge. On the left we have fixed broadband penetration, and on the right, mobile broadband penetration. You can see that in the developed world, we're reaching approximately 25% penetration. That is, 25% of the population has access to broadband access services, and in mobile, it's a little over 50%. Versus the developed countries, which are approximately 5% for fixed and approximately 8% for mobile. Antigua basically sits on the fixed spectrum. Sits today about 8% penetration, which is world average. On the mobile side, it just appears as a blip, basically. It really doesn't register significant penetration. But the challenge is how do we get these penetration levels, broadband, to a level that it, in fact, can be a transformative service and enabler across all sectors, whether it's water, tourism, health, education. That's the key benefit of broadband, and that's our challenge. If we were to raise penetration rates in the Caribbean states upwards to 50% penetration, which the ITU and several advocates of broadband are requiring in the next 5 years, we're talking anywhere from between $3 to $5 billion of just investment to make that happen, depending on the cost of that actual capex per pop. Next. So the good story is that in most cases penetration is not so bad. The sad story is that we're losing ground here. The gap is increasing significantly. Next. And you can see this even more dominant when you just focus on the Dominican Republic. Next, please. So key to broadband deployment, of course, is the supply side. getting the fiber optics out, getting the wireless networks out, and also the demand side, the absorption, using ICTs, using broadband for productive uses. And a key element of that, of course, is the cost of devices and the availability and access to broadband infrastructure, as well as affordability. And you can see here that on average, the world average, we're talking about, if you focus on the broadband, the green bar, the prices are all over. And this is a percentage of monthly income. You can see Africa is completely off the charts. They're still paying prices for a basic broadband access, which is about 156K per month, kilobits per month, per second, of over two, in some cases over 2 times their monthly income. Obviously, that's a significant constraint to growth. We're seeing in the Caribbean states, which is, again, according to approximating world averages, close to 20 to 25% of monthly income for a basic broadband package. Not bad, but still a ways to go if you look at the developed countries. Next. So what is the role of government in this? Typically broadband, ICT, is the domain of the private sector, and it should be, because it's been proven that the private sector will drive probably 80% of all investment and innovation in the ICT space. But there's a significant role for a government, because government has to put in place the enabling environment, the policies and regulations to attract the private sector, to bring in the civil society, to bring in the youth, to train them and provide the skills they need to utilize this technology. And so we talk about supply, and we talk about absorption capacity. That means training IT skills, incubators, and creating SMEs and providing impulse to the youth to develop new businesses and applications. And of course, universal service. Again, the private sector will take us most of the way there, but there's going to be probably about 20 to 15% of the population that will not be served by the private sector for various reasons, because of market failure, pricing, devices, it's all elements. So the government has a strong role to play in promoting that. Next. Now, what are some of the things we can do immediately? One is we can think about the CARSIP program. The CARSIP program is the Caribbean Regional Information and Communications Program that was recently approved by the Board of Directors. That's open to all CARICOM countries. The first 3 who have basically become members: St. Vincent, the Grenadines, St. Lucia, and Grenada. This is a program that allows a country such as Antigua to look at various components based on the level of sophistication that they, where they stand in the ICT supply chain, whether they want to focus on policy regulation, or they want to focus on connectivity, or they want to focus on innovation, jobs. This program allows them to pick and choose different components that they can then implement with World Bank support. And then, of course, I mentioned the Universal Service Access Funds and developing relevant applications and skills. Next. So what are some of the specific regulatory issues? We are landing today here in Antigua, Dickinson Bay, some very significant submarine cable bandwidth. It's landed. The question is, we need to get it out there at the right price. We need to get it at the right price and the right quality so that we can enable these small businesses and youth to use this capacity. Infrastructure sharing. We need to get all the operators to start thinking about sharing towers, ducts, passive infrastructure, so that we lower the cost of access. And of course, we have to think about releasing spectrum. The spectrum that's going to be created from migrating from the analog to the digital switchover that everyone's committed to doing. And this is going to release very, very valuable spectrum that's going to allow new operators, new entrepreneurs to provide high quality broadband services at very low cost points. And of course, skills and innovation. Thank you. Next. Now let's talk about logistics. We all know that tourism is significant and at the heart of everyone in this room, of this country. It's the heartbeat of this country. Do we need to start thinking about how we reposition our transportation to more overnight stays, for example, versus the one-off daily visit from the cruise ships? There are opportunities here that we need to, and I'm sure maybe you've considered it before, but let's take a look at it. Let's try to enable technology to make these things happen. As you can see, the expenditure has taken a dip since 2008, similar to all of your peers and your neighbors. Next. Now, we got to get fundamental as an import industry, both for services and for delivery of goods. We have to be competitive. We have to drive down costs. We have to get in place the infrastructure to facilitate that. Next. And of course, there are huge costs involved that needs to be basically decreased over time. But you can see that Antigua and Barbuda is in pretty good shape in most cases, but it depends on where the shipments are going. It makes a big difference. Next. And further cost comparisons to Buenos Aires, for example. Next. And what could be a solution? Do we need to start looking at an integrated approach throughout the OES and how we address with logistics, how we address the tourism industry? Do we need to start looking at multimodal approaches to connectivity? What about the operational utilization of our assets and the alignment of costs? And what are the linkages to the ports, to the terrestrial networks need to be further developed? Next. And trade logistics, a major constraint. According to those who use the services, there's significant room for improvement. Next. What are the biggest issues? 74% of doing business time to import relates to documentation and border clearance requirements. What are the issues? Cargo issues include high port charges and documentation. $900 per container, basically, which is relatively high compared to your peers. And there are gaps in capacity as well as infrastructure and equipment. And what are the improvements? Let's use ICT. Let's automate. Let's improve. Let's implement PPPs. The bank is sponsoring a huge ICT enabling project in Ghana where we've gone into the Customs and Trade Administration, and through the implementation of ICTs, we've decreased the time to get through customs from approximately 2 months to 8 hours. And the revenue increases are just incremental to the point where we're sharing those revenues with the private sector who have helped us implement the government these changes. Next. And the doing business data shows a number of documents required in Antigua, 8, versus Singapore, 4. World ranking, 110. Relatively close to the peers, but not quite international best practice. Next. And I'll turn this over to my colleague. Thank you.